Alright, so the first thing that we want to do, we want to change our master setting. So how are you doing this? You're gonna go down here, you're gonna click on it, you go to your master settings, and then you want to change the timeline resolution in the resolution that you want to work on. In my case, I want to work in a 1920 by 1080 HD timeline resolution. Then I want to keep the timeline frame rate at 25. So if you live in Europe, the Europe standard is 25. I know that in the US that's different, that's 24 or 23, so you can change it up here. But my timeline needs to be 25 frames per second. Then playback frame rate is 25 of course, and the video format is also 1080 by 25 frames per second. If you don't want to change this every single time, then you can go to these three dots up here and you can set the current setting as a default preset. You're gonna hit it, you're gonna save it, and every time you're gonna restart DaVinci Resolve, you have this setting as a default preset setting. When you go up here, you see this is the timeline, and this is where you're gonna edit your video clips. But in here, you see that it starts with 1. But sometimes when you are working in a timeline, that can be really confusing. I'm gonna show it to you right now. So you see up here, it starts at 1, and there you see these are the seconds, okay? And these are the minutes. And you want to just start at a clean 0 number. How are you doing this? So delete this really quick and start fresh. So you go to your DaVinci Resolve. Up here you go to Preferences, and there you go to Editing, and in here you go to your user setting, and there you see Start Timecode Setting. This one you want to change to 0. Okay, let's do that really quick and save it. Then you want to change some other settings up here, Preferences, and you're gonna click on Project, Save and Load. This is a really important setting that you want to hit because it will literally save your life. So you're gonna hit Lifesaver and Project Backups. When you're working on a big project and DaVinci Resolve, it almost never crashes, but when it crashes, most of the time it will save the project. So I'm always clicking these two boxes. So you can set it by your own preferences, how many backups you want, and how many minutes, and how many hours, and how many days. It's up to you. Then you can go and set the location where you want to have these backups, and now you want to save it. So before we're going to create a timeline, I want to create a new bin. So click on my right, and I'm gonna name it timeline because I just want to work very organized. Double click on this bin, and now we're gonna create our first timeline. So we're gonna click on our right, and right up here you see timelines. Create new timeline, and then we can say day 1. And right up here you can change the amount of video tracks and audio tracks you're working with. So let's say 5. So then it automatically gonna create 5 video tracks and 5 audio tracks. Then audio track type is stereo. This box I'm gonna hit and use the project settings. And now we're gonna create. And if I'm gonna hit create, you're gonna check out right up here that he created 5 video tracks and 5 audio tracks. Boom. You see this? Right, so now we are in the timeline, and this is where you're gonna edit your video clips. So let's import one video clip and show you the rest. So we imported a video clip, but let's say that we want to delete some video tracks and some audio tracks because it's too many. We simply gonna select our track, we're gonna click on the right, and we want to delete this track. We want to delete this track as well. Let's say we want to do the same for the audio track, delete track and delete the track. If you want to do it manually, you can do this also by adding a track. Click on your right. You can add just simply one track, Or if you want to add multiple tracks, you can go up here to the number of the tracks that you want to add. Let's say I want to add one track and one number of audio track. Boom, I created and added another track. Pretty simple. Let's delete it again. Now let's say that you want to move this track, this video track up here. You're simply gonna hit on your right and you want to move a track up. You see, it just simply moved up. Really easy. If you want to move it down, you say move the track down. You can add more tracks on a different way, and you basically just grab your clip and your audio track and you're gonna drag it all the way up. See what happens. Boom, boom, boom. You can do this like multiple times. Alright, so I imported more clips and I want to show what it does when you hit this icon. When I hit the lock track, I'm gonna lock everything on the track and I'm not able to change anything on that track anymore. I'm gonna show it to you right now. Lock it. And when I want to import a video clip on this track, right up here, I am not able to do that anymore. So I can't make any changes on this track anymore. And the same with the audio track. If you lock it, I can't change anything on the audio right up here. So let's unlock it. So then we go to the next icon, and the next icon is Auto Track Selector. I'm gonna show it to you what it does when you don't select it. So when you don't select the icon and you go through the timeline, it doesn't select the clip. And if you want to go through the timeline, you want to select the clip where you scroll through. Okay, so you're gonna see, I'm gonna select this icon and this one for the audio, and now boom, it selects this clip and it selects the other clips. So pretty helpful. We go to the next icon, and that is disable a video track. If you don't want to see this video track, you just simply hit disable video track, and then all the video tracks who are layered down on video track number 1 are disabled. So if you want to enable them again, you just simply click again. The same is with the audio. There you see the S for solo. Right, so when you have multiple audio on the timeline, and for example this audio track is the song and you only want to hear the song, you just simply gonna click on S and then it's only gonna play that song. If you want to mute this song, if you want to mute the track and you don't want to hear it, you're gonna click on this icon, mute track, and then you're not gonna hear the song. So let's delete this audio track, delete. Okay, so let's say that you are having a big project and you're working on a big monitor and you want to see your timeline very zoomed in. So how can you do this? You go to this icon right up here, and when you change this line, you can zoom into the timeline and you can zoom out. You also have shortcuts for this, and I created another video where I explain more about shortcuts. So let's say that you're working in your timeline and you want to see this video clip more clear. You want to see it bigger. So how can you make it bigger? You see these lines? You're simply gonna click on this line and you're gonna drag it all the way up. This is how you make your clip wider. You can do exactly the same for your audio track. You just drag it all the way down. And this is very helpful when you want to read the audio track waveform. You can do that also by the whole timeline. And you can do that also with this line above here to make your timeline even bigger. So when you have a mouse with a roller next to here, you can have a really helpful shortcut. I hit Shift on my keyboard and then I select this one and I drag it all the way out. If I'm gonna go with my mouse on the video clip, I can do exactly the same for the video clip. The next thing that you want to know in the timeline is this option, the timeline view option. So The first view is when you want to stack timelines. So you want to have two timelines under each other. You want to click on this one, and I'm gonna explain you in a second everything about stacked timeline. But first, let me show you this. If you hit this, you see your timeline up here. Okay, so day 1. And if we're gonna hit it again, you can see that you can have different view options of your timeline. So you just need to play around with this, what you prefer. So I always leave it on the first setting, but if you like to prefer this one, this thumbnail right up here, you can do that. And if you prefer this one, you can do that as well. Alright, so the same is for the audio tracks. You can decide the view options of your audio tracks right up here. And then you can make it wider here, and you can make your audio also wider up here. So now let's create another timeline, because now your project is done, but you want to change some things, but you're not sure if you do it right. But the first project that you created is safe, and you just want to duplicate it. So how do you do this? You go to your first timeline, and then you're gonna click on your right, you're gonna duplicate the timeline, and now you created a copy of day 1. And if you now hit this plus button up here, you can select day 1 copy timeline in here. So if I'm gonna double click on here, you see we have the copy timeline and the real timeline. When you want to work on the copy timeline and don't want to see the day 1 timeline, you're gonna simply hit the view option, you're gonna click the first few stacked timelines, boom, and then now you're working on the copy timeline. How can you see and how can you be sure that you're working on the copy timeline? Because up here you see day 1 copy timeline. But now I want to go back to my real timeline. I just simply hit this arrow and boom, now I'm back on my day 1 timeline. Now let's say that we want to have these two timelines above each other. Remember, view option, timeline stacked, and now we have two timelines up here. Basically, you want to hit this button, and now you see you selected another timeline under your first two timelines. But very important, don't immediately start to work in this timeline, because then you're gonna create a whole new timeline. Now you're gonna select from your day 1 timeline this video, and you're gonna put it in here. You see up here it creates a new timeline, timeline 3. But we don't want that, because we want our day 1 copy timeline up here, okay? So what are we doing? We're gonna delete this timeline. We're gonna hit arrow key. We're gonna select the timeline that we want to select, and there we're gonna double click the timeline that we want to select in this timeline. Double click on it, and now you see you just fully stack these two timelines under each other, and you can start to make changes to each timeline. Alright, so let's go back to day 1, and let's go back just to one timeline again. How are we doing this? View option, first one, and now we are back in our day 1 timeline. Okay, now we are almost there, but I can imagine that there is a bit of a confusion, because you shot your footage on 4K, let's say 50 frames per second, but you're working in a 1080p timeline. You remember? If we go back to our cut page, we can see up here that we are in a full HD timeline. And why do I work in a full HD timeline? Simply the reason is that my computer is way quicker, the program works way faster, it has all to do with working fast. I also make proxies, but that's something that I'm gonna explain in another video. But if you want to change it to 4K and you want to export it in 4K, simply hit this button and go back to your edit, and now your timeline is a 4K timeline and ready to export. Another quick tip that I want to give you in the timeline is, if you have a really big project, you have a lot going on your timeline, and you want to go and see through your timeline, you can do that with this line up here. But if you don't want to do this, you can use the shortcut fast forward and fast reserve. So basically, if you hit it once, it goes really fast. If you hit it twice, it goes even faster. And the third time is really fast. The same is backwards. So fast reverse, 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. Okay, so how can you change this setting? You go to your Davinci Resolve, you check for your keyboard customizations, and then you just simply hit fast reverse forward and fast reverse backwards. Okay, so you can customize this setting whatever you prefer. I can imagine that you worked with like multiple timelines and you want to rename a timeline. Okay, how can you do this? You just simply double click on your timeline up here, and let's say you want to give this another name. Type in duplicate timeline and enter, and now you change the name of your timeline. And now we are at the last tip, and this is one of the most simple tips I can give you, but we all forget it, is to do once in a while yourself ctrl+S, because then you're gonna save the project. And that's it for today, guys. I hope you learned a lot of new things. If you like the content, just give me a thumb up, write something in the comment, and I'm gonna check you out in the next video. See ya!